Have you ever gone somewhere and somebody either in your area starts talking about religion or they talk directly to you about religion? And has that ever made you feel maybe uncomfortable or uncertain on what to do? Or maybe you known that somebody was going to come and talk about religion and you were thinking about, ooh, I should really talk to this person, not because you're necessarily seeking out knowledge, which could be, but maybe you're coming to question them, to test them, to see if what they're saying makes sense. And that's exactly what they want. It is a honey trap, a honey pot that has been laid out for anybody, whether they believe or don't believe. It's there. And its entire goal is to draw you in, engage you, and change your understanding. Now, for some of these people that are doing this, they're doing it because they genuinely believe what they are saying. That doesn't make them right, but they believe they are right. They have blind faith. And so, talking to these people who really, really believe is not going to change anything for them, but it might change something for you. Then there are the other people who know that what they're saying to you is not true. They're not doing it for your well being, they're doing it for their own power and wealth. They're doing it to entrap you, to indoctrinate you, and make you one of their acolytes. Now, I'm not talking about any particular religion here. Could be. I could give you real world examples. We could talk about, well, here's one that not very many people are going to disagree with me about, but there are still actually adherents to the People's Temple, which, if you've never heard of it, you should look up Jim Jones and the People's Temple, which ended in a mass suicide and murder down in South America by a crazy man called Jim Jones, who really lost his way, but he was never quite sane. This man was a psychopath, and very controlling, even from a young age. He did very strange things. And he convinced people that he was somebody, not just somebody special, but somebody sent by God. Thousands of people were pouring into his temples, and they were seeing him all over the country, and they were giving him a lot of money, which is a common phenomenon in America, because a lot of people in America are desperately looking for purpose and belonging and salvation and so on. And they become easy targets for people like Jim Jones. But this is not what I wanted to talk about specifically. What I do want to talk about is what you should do. Now, there are two categories of people when it comes to how you should react to this situation. Okay. The first one is the vast majority of people, including myself, people who lack enough eloquence and charisma and knowledge and other factors that make it possible for you to have a fair, balanced conversation with that person. Actually, the deck, so to speak, is rigged. The person who's doing this is not going into this with a good faith intent of having a fair and equitable debate with you. They have an agenda. whatever their religious belief is, they have an agenda. They could be atheists, they could be deists, they could be Christians, Buddhists, whatever. They have an agenda. And that agenda is to promote what they believe. And I try not to do this on my channel, even though I have very strong opinions about this. I try not to talk much about why I believe what I believe and why perhaps you should believe what I believe or what somebody else believes, because I don't really feel that it's fair for me to impose that on you. But these people have no qualms about doing that. So with the vast majority of us, we lack the necessary attributes and knowledge to be able to prevail in a conversation like this. If you don't believe me, watch these conversations. There are people from all different religions. Some of them are very, very famous, who do this for a living, and they make really, really good money, whether they're Muslims, or they're Christians, or they're some other religion. They're very talented, but they're doing it from a position that is not, it's not possible for you to win. And so for those of you who are like, oh, so and so is coming to my campus to discuss religion, you should really just not get involved. In fact, I would recommend that you not even listen. And the reason for this is number one, a lot of people, especially young people, are very, very vulnerable to the techniques that are used by these people. Techniques that seem loving and reasonable and logical, and they can be very persuasive people. But they are, and some of them may believe they're doing this from a place of love. Some of them are doing it from a place of arrogance. Some of them are doing it from a place of greed. But they will use false logic against you. They will use all kinds of manipulative techniques to convince you that they're right. Even though if you actually were to take the information and tear it down piece by piece, you would potentially discover they were wrong. Or at the very least, that what they're telling you has no basis in fact. So for the vast majority of people, if this person is somebody you want to confront because you have a different religious belief, or if you're somebody who's searching, you should be extremely careful when you approach people like this, because their goal is entirely about gaining dominion over you, either for themselves or for the congregation or for the leader of their religion or cult. And yes, it could be a cult member or cult leader even. And I would argue that most of us do not have the ability to prevail. And if we cannot prevail in a conversation against such a person who has been potentially trained by experts on how to have these conversations in a way that seems reasonable but is in fact not reasonable or fair, it's just not a good idea. Now, there are a small number of people who can take apart that conversation and tell you where and how the presenter has derailed it to maintain control, where and what techniques they used, like the channel rationality rules. He does that. Now, I'm a little bit irritated with him sometimes, because sometimes he allows his personal opinions to get in the way of what he's doing. But ultimately, channels like that help us to see past the trickery, to understand that that person is manipulating people. So if you are somebody who understands how to, number one, recognize all kinds of manipulation, be it false logic or gaslighting or anything else, and you have the facts about you, both your religion and their religion, as it stands from the scripture, not from anything they're going to say, but you can quote their scripture back at them and explain it. And you can stay calm, and you can be reasonable, and you can make yourself look like the better person. Then you are somebody who potentially could prevail in a conversation with that person. But you have to be able to do all those things and more. So, for the vast majority of you, if you see that guy on the corner with the Bible, or you see that man who's got his prayer rug and is praying in public and then preaching or something like that, which would be pretty unusual, I admit, or you see that there's this guy presenting at a college campus, you just don't go. Stay away. Because they're looking for converts. They're looking for people to get control of. And most of us, even those of us who understand what's going on, we lack the ability, at best, to engage them and show that they're wrong. And at worst, we lack the willpower to resist their indoctrination, their manipulation. So, and if you're in a place where everybody like knows you, like, or maybe not everybody, but a lot of people know you in your campus, for example, where a lot of people are young and very easily influenced, you can kind of paint a target on yourself, and it can lead to a lot of unpleasantness sometimes. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who comes to campus to talk about religion is going to do that. However, I will say that some people who will watch you, if you fail, or even if you succeed, if they're not willing to accept that you succeeded, that you were the victor, so to speak, in that debate, they might decide to make your life miserable. And some of those people are genuinely crazy, and some of them are even dangerous. So if you're going to go ahead and engage yourself in a debate, at least try to do it where the stakes are not so high, and also where there's some control by a neutral arbiter to make sure that things stay on track and people are behaving appropriately, which oftentimes, I'll admit it, there are two kinds of debate. There's debate where you're scoring points, which is what most of these people are doing. Especially if you see them with a camera, they're trying to score points on YouTube and other places to show how right they are, which, oh my God, people that believe them eat it up. They eat it up like it's the most amazing ambrosia in the world. And then there's the other kind of debate where you're having an exchange of knowledge, where both of you are approaching this conversation from the perspective of, I want to come away from this having learned something and maybe having my mind changed. Which, if you are somebody who's malleable, who's easily manipulated, who has weak willpower, that's very dangerous. But if you have a strong willpower and critical thinking and so on, that you could be very beneficial for you potentially. But I suggest for most of us to just stay away from it. And in fact, I would suggest just being very careful. I am going to provide one anecdote from my life, because I've had this happen to me a lot. I've had my wishes to not be proselytized repeatedly be rejected, ignored, and even discarded entirely. But one time I was working at Amazon, and this young lady who I'd always been nice to started talking to me, and she wanted to know about my religious beliefs, and I knew what was going to happen. I knew it. I knew it. So I told her about what had happened with my wife. I told her about my religious beliefs. I was very honest with her. I answered all of her questions. Do you know what she did at the end? Not only had her whole intent been exactly what I thought it was, which was to proselytize me into her religious beliefs, but also she called me a liar. And that I had not expected. I had not expected for her to call me a liar. I never spoke to her again. I thought about going to HR and filing a complaint against her for what she did, but I didn't. But that was one of the most egregious violations of my rights as an American that I've experienced. Uh, well, there are worse ones, but as far as like religiously, that was really bad. One of the worst. So definitely don't get involved in conversations like that, and definitely not at the workplace. Especially if your intention is to convince that person they're wrong, because that can end up very poorly for you. So I don't know if I'm doing a very good job um, of explaining my advice to you, and I apologize. As I get older, I get less and less eloquent. I find it more and more difficult to remember certain words and present things, but I hope that I've explained things well enough. But if I haven't, number one, I apologize. And if I've offended you, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did to offend you, but I'm sorry. Number three, if you have any constructive criticism for me, I'd like to have you put it in the comments. If you're just going to be a jerk, go away, because I won't pay any attention to you, and I'll block you. So that's it then. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you've learned something. I hope that I've given you a little bit of protection from the wolves out there who wear sheep's clothing. I hope you have a great day too.